Jiro here for Umbra Games, testing my objective review chops on one of the most critically acclaimed worst video games to grace the Xbox 360, Ride to Hell Retribution. Ride to Hell was developed by Technics, who had done pretty much exclusively racing titles from the late 90s to this decade, including a lot of licensed properties like 007 Racing, Fast and the Furious, and Pimp My Ride. Upon researching the history of this game, it was allegedly developed initially in 2008 and then just kind of vanished from everyone's radar, until resurfacing again in 2013, and then was released on PS3, Xbox 360, and PC. 1 year later, in September of 2014, Steam even took it out of the store. Now, I was challenged by a subscriber to review a subpar game, so I decided why not. Ride to Hell Retribution follows the story of Jake Conway, a Vietnam vet that returns home from his tour to discover his little brother Mikey isn't so little anymore. Mikey decides to disobey Uncle Mac and go out partying on the town one night, so Mac asks Jake to follow him. Mikey has a habit of wearing his deceased father's biker gang cut, which for those of you that miss Sons of Anarchy is the slang term for the vest they wear with their gang symbol and other bits of patched information. Toledo Conway, the boy's father, used to belong to a gang called Retribution, hence the name of the game, and a rival gang called the Devil's Hand sees Mikey, captures him, kills him in front of Jake, and then shoot Jake in the side and expect that he should have died, and are later surprised when he isn't. Aside from the melodramatic voice acting, the poor sound engineering and volume levels, the most generic subtitle font you could find, texture pop and frame rate issues in cutscenes, and the exaggeration of very bad trope plot points. Wait, I had something here. That list just got a little long and I forgot, sorry. Let's just move on to level design. The game begins with Jake on his bike, riding down the highway, and it flashes to a few different moments allowing you to take control. I'm guessing sort of attempting a tutorial here. The first flashback is Jake taking a turret and shooting a lot of people, or at least trying to, teaching you that left trigger zooms and right trigger fires. The first second of the first time I get control of this game, somehow I'm killed, and we're treated to a falling inside of Jake's body. After reloading and watching the cutscene again, when I get to this place, I get shot a lot while using the turret, and I don't die. Guessing it was maybe just some kind of loading glitch? Anyway, great first impression. After that sequence, we flash back and deliver the story that I talked about a minute ago. Then Jake decides to hunt down everyone involved in Mikey's death, which serves as a mission structure. You only know where one or two guys are at a time, and each one gives information leading to the next one, which Jake will then torture and kill to get more information. In between these missions, Jake hangs out in his hometown of Dead End. Here you can find a drug dealer to sell your spoils of killing endless amounts of bikers, as well as your form of character progression, an army truck where you can buy new melee combat moves and firearms. There's also Mac's Garage where you can customize the bike that you will hardly ever see. When you want to start a mission, you go to the board by the garage and choose. You can even replay previous missions to find collectibles that you missed, like one of the many playing cards that unlock new bike parts for the bike that you hardly ever see. The weird thing about all of this setup is that it feels like there was supposed to maybe be an open world here. The rest of the town is modeled out in the same detail as Mac's Garage, but you can't really go there. It's very similar to a later scene where you're supposed to run down streets finding prostitutes for information, and if you take a wrong turn, it does a quick loading and brings you back to the alley you went out of. The other really confusing thing is when you check your game progress, there are 37 missions total. Each gang member you take down fulfills a seemingly random number of these, making the seams of which mission is which indecipherable, further pointing to the fact that you would be going from point to point in an open world, and instead they just stitch them all together with an often jarring amount of scene change, including Jake leaving his bike behind and driving for miles and then all of a sudden having his bike again. Now, this would kind of help explain why this game ended up so bad. With the first incarnation of it surfacing in 2008, it's possible that the company looked at the assets that had been made and told the developers just to get something shippable put together. So we got this Frankenstein's monster of a game delivered. Alright, now let's talk dialogue. Wow. Granted, I wasn't alive and in the motorcycle gang scene of the 60s and 70s, but I have a difficult time believing that anyone talked like this. Scattered throughout 4 levels is a prostitute being threatened by her pimp, and when Jake kills the pimp, she then has sex with him, fully clothed, in a very ridiculous cutscene. One woman Jake tries to get info from is the wife of the guy he's hunting, and she promises to tell him where he is if she'll get her wedding ring back, which of course immediately demands intercourse as a reward as well. And that list goes on and on. There are two mission types from a gameplay perspective. The first is the driving. Now, this part kind of makes me sad because Technics was known for some at least competent racing games. The control during these scenes are so loose. There is a brake button, but there's no reverse. So when you hit something, the game just takes you back up the road in a quick blackout and lets you start again.
Here's some about you.
There's a segment where you drive a semi and it feels like you're riding on ice the entire time, not in Southern California. Combat will occur either in the form of the screen freezing for a second as it loads someone coming into melee range, where you're required to tap the button as quickly as you can to almost fill up a bar to engage in a cinematic beatdown, or a slow-motion gunfight where you move your reticle and comically shoot some targets 10 to 15 times in enormous sprays of blood before their bike erupts in a ginormous explosion, yet still rolls away from it upright. I think the best parts of these scenes, though, are the tricks. You're graded by how long you pull one off, which is fine for wheelies and jumps considering you get like 6 feet just for hitting a pebble in the road. But the power slide? Could you imagine a guy going down a highway in a 700-foot power slide? I mean, he can tell the cops he just wanted an A rating, but I'm pretty sure that's not even physically possible. At one point, the game makes you do a boost to fly over the top of a helicopter. Can you tell me how to boost? I mean, sure, the game says at loading screens that I can do a tuck boost, but it never tells me how. It's not in the control scheme when you go to look for it. I actually had to go to the internet to look up to see that pushing up on the left stick makes you go uncontrollably fast for a random interval. Now, the gameplay tip said to use it to catch up in tough races, but the rubber band catch-up in this game makes that giant truck you're chasing accelerate at the same speed as your boost. So what's the point? And yeah, they never tell you how to boost, but they can display the way to punch guys across the screen the entire time you're in a bike level where it's not even applicable. The second type of gameplay is on foot. These are long, drawn-out levels where Jake faces a ton of enemies, but they actually have quite a variation in setting, including a brewery, a sawmill, underground boxing rings, casinos, a plane cemetery, and a human cemetery.
Your mama.
Jake can perform melee combos or use firearms as he works his way through each linear environment. With melee, the A button is punch and the X button is a block-breaking kick. The Y button will make Jake block and also counterattack when you see the icon pop above an enemy's head. Now, after you purchase combos from the army van, you'll find yourself doing an AXA combo for pretty much the entire rest of the game, and when you're successful with it, it's your best bet. Unfortunately, with combos, randomly the first blow will throw Jake or the enemy back, making the rest of your hits miss. Jake's life bar uses a typical shooter methodology of the time, where your screen will start to show red marks when you take damage, and then in Ride to Hell's case goes black and white when you take a certain amount. And as long as you hide around a corner or get in cover for a minute, you'll recover. While enemies will shoot if they have a firearm, and rush Jake if they don't, Jake isn't limited to one or the other. And I found several opportunities of lining them up as they entered a room where you could just headshot everyone as they walked in. All enemy models appear to be the same height. Speaking of which, though, it's annoying how many non-headshots an enemy takes. Pair this with the bulletproof cowboy hats or the remarkably resistant hockey masks, and you have to be prepared to shoot a lot. The gun options also really kill any sense of progression, though, because even the most powerful rifle still takes way too many non-headshot bullets, and the weakest pistol still makes the one headshot kill. You can only carry one pistol and one heavy weapon at a time, so even when the rocket launcher is unlocked for the last level, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to take it. The second of slow motion you get with each headshot, I think meant to be reward you and help you, but the velocity of your reticle, moved by an analog stick, hurts you just as often. I don't think all enemies quite understand the concept of cover, as they'd often leave their heads exposed in a firefight. There's a fun thing though, if you kill them as they're getting ready to roll out of cover, the game physics apparently just don't know what to do and will often send them flying through the air comically. Although, I say that, but I don't know that Jake understands cover either, because you use the left bumper to roll, as well as to get into cover, which should be used as a place to fire from. But so many times, the cover sticking point isn't at a place that lets you see how to aim and fire. There are also several points around the level set up, marked with a blue bottle and X button, where you can perform a several second long, one-hit environmental kill that are all pretty much the same head-bashing animation. There's also a really great range attack that seems to randomly trigger, and you activate by hitting the B button. It's hilarious. It triggers a set of QuickTime events though, where the developers couldn't even be bothered to make graphics for the timer to go all the way down. It'll just stall about halfway and then the combo will break. you know, if you got distracted by a shiny object or something while you were playing the event. The camera struggles at times to be where it should be, like when you're trying to aim but you're close enough to a wall so that the reticle will just appear through Jake's head. It's a little more difficult to make a shot that way. The same thing happens with melee, as the camera will jerk around and you won't see any of the action, but as long as you keep pressing AXA, you're going to be fine. Sometimes the game will make you run back to your bike after you accomplish an objective, and I kept waiting for something to happen on the way back. Otherwise they just normally end the stage, so it felt really off. They do try and vary up some of the level, like one has you gathering 7 packages, but the gates of each section of that area won't open until you get the one that's there, so it kind of defeats the purpose. There's also a scene where you're supposed to chase a prospect, where if you let the guy out of your sight for one moment, you fail. But to open up some of the gates, you have to stop and fight some guys first, and the scene only ends when you get to a specific road and aim your gun at him and to fill up a meter, even though there are enemies everywhere. I think my favorite level, though, is when Jake tries to break into a ranch with an electric fence. He spies a tanker across the street and goes to beat up the drivers that just all happen to be wearing the same outfit that day. I expected we'd be crashing the tanker through the electric fence and using that for the ensuing mayhem. Instead, we drive a really long distance in a slippery feeling truck to a dam where you proceed to blow the whole power grid. Graphically, honestly there are some areas of this game that don't look too bad. The draw distances on objects are decent, even if the texture pop-in is pretty bad. The characters though, wow. The male's hands are all so huge. There's a cutscene where Jake asks family friend Ellie if she's alright as he touches her face and looks like he could very nearly crush her head on examination.
I see you found
The music, the first time each is played, isn't that bad either. I could definitely see going to some bar in the Midwest and hearing music like this, but the song is looped multiple times because the stages are so long, and it's not that they're catchy, it's just that the mood fit a 60s to 70s biker scene, so they do get old after a while. So I'm not really much of a it's so bad it's good in the forms of media I enjoy, but I do have to admit, when I wasn't cursing the game for some poor design decision or cheapness, I actually laughed a lot. But I was also a little sad. I mean, aside from the GTA 4 expansion of The Lost and the Damned, we haven't ever really had a biker game, and I feel like that's a missed opportunity. I mean, we have plenty of games where we can see into Japanese culture, both ancient and modern, and the same goes for Europe. So I think they could possibly tap some global appeal out of it. You just need some good writers and a studio that hasn't made racing games exclusively responsible for the action sequences. Make no mistake, Ride to Hell has terrible execution, laughable writing, very boring gameplay, horrible control, a bad camera, and a story that's hilariously atrocious, but to me it feels bad because it was rushed and unfinished, and forced to come out to try to salvage someone's bottom line, not because the core concepts or desires were misplaced. But yes, as it was delivered, it deserves its low rating across the board. Using my action-adventure genre rating scale, it lands at a 16 out of 100. This is Jiro from Umbra Games. Thanks for watching. Always happy to take requests, but I like it more when you want a good game reviewed. Subscribe to the channel to keep up with new videos, and feel free to follow and send requests on Twitter @Umbra Games.